Do you have people in your life where you cannot talk to them for a period of time, and then all of a sudden you're back together having a conversation and it feels like no time has gone by? Friends, I am so glad that you are here listening in for this conversation, watching and having just a moment to kind of reflect in your own life. I'm super excited to bring Jessica DeLeon in. We've had her on the show before, back by positive and exciting requests. She's back with us today. And Jess, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself because you have so many different incredible titles, things that you do, and would love for you just to share from the heart who you are.
Thank you, Sarah. So my name is Jessica DeLeon. I have a spiritual counseling practice here in Southern California. I have been trained in a plethora of different modalities, all different types of holistic and integrative modalities that have helped me along my journey to wellness that I now offer in service to my community. I am a stepmom and a wife and a sister and a daughter and a friend, and have been a longtime student of Sarah's. She's the one who initially, she taught me Holy Fire Reiki and Karuna Reiki, which is one of the modalities that I use in my healing practice. And she is a dear, dear friend to me and my family.
Jessica, I'm just excited about our conversation today because this is something that I have been learning about from you, sacred union, and something that I have also been reading about and hearing other people every now and then have these very quiet conversations about, and that you are ready to bring it forward and talk about it. I'm super excited about this. So I'm just curious, as you were growing up, were there people in your life that were exhibiting, showing sacred union, that were leading the way for you?
You know, there's one couple that I always felt like really embodied this very mature love and not necessarily in the fact that it was like easy for them, but I just could tell that they were devoted to their relationship. And that was my Aunt Denise and my Uncle Joe.
Mm-hmm.
They were really the ones who would often have conversations about the depth of their love and from like a spiritual standpoint. And I remember thinking like, this is something different than just being married. This is like a spiritual, holy context of partnership. And I don't know if it was witnessing them growing up or if this is something that was just instilled, but I've from a very young age always had like a very high expectation of the level of partnership that I was calling into my life, and would not settle for anything other than that, like a holy, holy union.
Yes. And I one of the great experiences in my life was to be there when you and Daniel were married. And I mean, such a beautiful ceremony, and the way that it was truly, I don't use the word crafted lightly here. You, both of you, thought through every single part of what you guys were doing and how it would come together in order for you guys to have this beautiful ceremony for other people to be able to witness what you were moving into. You had found each other through incredible circumstances, and here you were in this place of choosing to move forward with that. And what an amazing, amazing thing. As you think about sacred union, for the listeners and viewers who are not familiar with this, I would love for you to share what your definition of it is.
Well, this has definitely changed over the years. You know, when I met Daniel, there was definitely this intense love, unlike anything I'd ever felt before. You know, I kind of joke that it was like being pulled into a black hole. Like there was nothing that I could do to stop this from happening. You know, it was like lifetimes of karma and just the intensity of what we experienced in a very short time. That's when I started to look forward, like language around what I was experiencing. And, you know, a lot of times, like modern day, there's like this new kind of concept of like twin flames, which is very much like a kind of a new age concept. And I think that there's, you know, some distortions in that, because it kind of describes like almost like there's two parties that have been separated. And so that like that one party is therefore half of themselves, and their counterpart is the other half of their soul, which I think leads to some kind of unhealthy attachments through that. But the best description that I've found, and it's very ancient, I mean, this is a story as old as time, is the Heros Gamos. And that can be described in many different religious texts, through many different cultures, going back as far as like, you know, the Sumerian goddess Inanna and her consort Dumuzi. There's Isis and Osiris in ancient Egypt. Through like the Gnostic texts, there's the marriage of Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, which is, you know, controversial for you know, kind of conservative Christians. But there's these descriptions of these beings, gods and goddesses, and human beings who come into union, into partnership in a profoundly holy manner.
Yes.
And so, you know, there's this kind of like biblical description of it in like the Song of Solomon describes like the bridegroom and the bridal suite, and through the Christian lens, it's, you know, preparing yourself for Christ and like holy marriage through the church and with God. And then, you know, kind of modern day, it's describing, you know, a profound partnership between two people who are committed to transformation and self-realization inside of this union, this holy container.
Right. And that marriage is in some ways, in America for tax purposes, is definitely the legal part, right? Signing the paperwork, and that's very much the legal aspect of it. But what you're talking about is not necessarily that. It can be in that, and it can lead to that. But you're talking about people who are fully complete on their own and coming into relationship, into a sacred union, choosing in that space to continue to grow, to continue to find themselves, to continue to learn. When I say find, I mean to express, learning to express ourselves in the highest, best way that is also authentic, and allowing agency, allowing the other person the full gift of being able to be themselves, and not trying to make them into what I think that they ought to be. Am I on track there?
Yeah, I think, you know, sacred union is more than just a specific type of relationship. It's like a state of consciousness. And so, you know, going back to like these ancient rituals and these sacred texts, you know, there's a description of the god and the goddess coming into one. There's the dissolving of polarities between the divine masculine and the divine feminine.
Yes.
In Eastern traditions, it's described in tantric yoga between the Shakti and Shiva. You know, there's all these different emanations of this concept. But it's more than just you and a specific person. I mean, someone could argue that you could access the consciousness of sacred union just through your specific spiritual practices.
Yes.
You know, coming into oneness with God. It's described as like the holy longing. It's what we all crave on the deepest human level, is to be one with God. And what I have found is like a fast track to accessing that level of consciousness is being married to my husband.
Yes.
And it's not just the legal document. It's not just the commitment that we've made to one another. It's the devotion that we have to our own evolution.
Yes.
And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand, is when they see, like when I was looking at my aunt and uncle, I just thought that maybe this was luck, that they were just lucky to have found each other. And now, having been in sacred union, you know, I've been with Daniel for 7 years now. We've been married for 5.
Yes.
It's not luck, it's courage.
It is daily courage.
Because being in sacred union is the most intense form of shadow work that you'll ever navigate in your life. And in the mirroring that happens, you know, like I describe it to the couples that I work with, that when you make these commitments, these vows, you know, this is sacred and holy, and it has an energetic frequency to it. So this level of love is a very high vibrational frequency that you're ushering into your lives, whether
Yes.
it's through committing to living together or your engagement or actually having your marital ceremony.
Mhm.
Every level of that relationship, the vibration increases. And this is quantum physics. The more that you usher in these high vibrational frequencies, the
Yes.
dense energies, the dense distorted frequencies are then going to come to the surface.
Yes.
And so you will be confronted with your deepest
Mhm.
pain, your deepest fear inside of
Yes.
this container. And I feel like that's really what I want to share in this conversation today, is that,
Mhm.
it's not this fairy tale of coming into, this partnership and that, two people are lucky to just love each other that intensely. With that level of intensity comes profound pain and fear that you've been carrying arguably for lifetimes, that you're now going to
Mhm.
be confronted with. And so many couples don't have the tools to navigate that. It just becomes incredibly overwhelming and scary. And so, you end up separating or divorcing. And
Mhm.
so I feel like this is one of the most important things that we can start to teach, is like how to engage in this process of doing shadow work, of conflict resolution, of nonviolent communication, because without these tools,
Mhm.
relationships are just doomed.
Jessica, I'd love to give you the floor here and have you just share about some of the tools that you help people work with and in this place of doing the deep shadow work. And I
Mhm.
fully agree with you that the emphasis so often is on the dress and the day and the flowers, and all of those things are
Right.
beautiful. All of them are. But not as much emphasis is given on the day to day. What's it going to feel like? What's it going to look like? And what's it going to be
Mhm.
inside of my being? How am I going to feel when I have been so triggered and am so full of fear,
Mhm.
false evidence appearing real, that's just showing up in my world in order for me to finally have conversations with it
Mhm.
and navigate that? I would love for you to share.
So a lot of my counseling practice is based in spiritual psychology from our teachers, Dr. Ron and Mary Hulnick, through the University of Santa Monica. So that's just like the framework of how I work with my clients. And Daniel did 3 years of spiritual psychology as well. So we both use those principles and practices inside of our marriage. And so what I've found that works for Daniel and I teach this to my clients, is like, first and foremost, you need to be able to self-counsel. So when there's an activation or a trigger that happens in your life, when something disturbs your peace, what do you do with that information? What do you do with those feelings? And most of us, just tend to like either repress or react. So like on the repressing end of the spectrum, that's just kind of taking this pain or this hurt that's coming forward, swallowing it and pushing it down until it makes you sick, or you have an explosion of material that comes up. Then other people lean towards more of a reactionary response, which is like there's that stimuli of the upset that comes in, and then your response is to react, and it's you know from that place of the wounding. So it's often can be very aggressive or hurtful when you react. And so I feel like a really important part of being able to do shadow work is owning your projections. And through the lens of spiritual psychology, one of the ways that we can identify a projection is when we get caught into the framework of, I'm upset because. I'm upset because Daniel said this and that hurt my feelings and what have you. And that is like, that's like a game of tug of war or merry-go-round. I'm upset because, well, I'm upset because of this. And it's just this back and forth that a lot of couples get caught in. And if we can transmute what's really going on, is that your partner has said or done something that, yes, has caused pain. And there's the external reality of, we all have to be responsible for the way that we speak to one another and the level of respect, and whether or not our actions are leaking energy inside of the container of our relationship, or if they're filling up our love cup, so to say. So everyone's responsible for the way that they show up inside of every relationship, whether we're talking about family, friendship, or romantic. That's the external reality. The internal reality is that what has just happened is pushing on a pain button that has been there for a very long time. And so what happens inside of these intimate relationships is that there's a mirroring going on where your partner is reflecting back to you the pain that you have been carrying for quite some time, perhaps since childhood. And our job is to have enough emotional intelligence to say, okay, I'm having an intense reaction to what you just said. It's disproportionate to what has just occurred. I need to take a time out and I need to do my process to see what's really going on here. And that's what I teach my clients how to do, is how to self-counsel, get to the root cause of what is really at play here. And it's always going to be some type of imprint or program that happened on earlier in life that is no longer functioning in a healthy way. And so we have to reconcile that. And so, again, being in sacred union requires a high level of emotional intelligence and spiritual maturity to be able to navigate, these really dense feelings that are going to come up in contrast to the profound love that you and your partner carry.
That is so profound how you shared that. And for me, that place of learning has really come to a place of being able to identify how I feel.
Yeah.
And, as a child, I would use, sad, mad, those kinds of words, right?
Uh-huh.
But to understand that there are so many different levels for the word disappointment, and for the word toxic, or for the word unhappy, and to be able to really spend time. And so one of my favorite tools that I use is, if I have a word and I'm not really quite sure what it is, I go to and I pick up my phone or go to the computer and put in wordhippo.com. Wordhippo, will give you antonyms or synonyms for whatever it is that you're working on, right?
Yeah.
And just start looking through the list. Do any of these helpful? And then I've also read several different books. There's work that Carol Montgomery has done also. I'm hoping she's going to publish soon, where she has a wheel that she's created, and it breaks out from the big words, right, for categories, and then breaks into a whole bunch of different ones through her 30 plus years of work that she has done. And I have found that wheel to be really, really helpful as well, because it's color coded as well.
I love
And so
that.
it just kind of helps me find, because if I can find the word to describe how I feel, for me, Jessica, that's that first step of validating that emotion.
Yeah.
But if I'm feeling disappointed and I'm saying that I'm mad, I haven't validated that I'm disappointed. I'm just saying that I'm mad. And so coming into that space of saying, this really is how I'm feeling. And then to be as gentle as I can in the delivery for myself, but also to the person that I'm going to be sharing this with, because I'm not just being triggered. These old woundings, these old habits, these old patterns aren't just through my 30 plus year marriage. I'm being triggered by people at the grocery store, right? People and just life, people. And coming and
they have a term for that in spiritual psychology. They call them stackers.
Ooh, tell me more.
So a stacker is like a person or a situation that brings up your unpleasant material. So it could be the person that cuts you off on the freeway. It could be someone who gives you a weird look at the grocery store. Anybody who brings up your material is called a stacker. And the pattern is when we don't acknowledge the stackers, and we don't do our work inside of what's being brought up, the stackers keep stacking. So you'll have multiple, characters come up with the same kind of thread of energy or a pattern that's coming up in these interactions that you're having. And it's all pointing to this wound that is ready to be transmuted.
Yes.
But again, how do you do that though? None of us were taught how to work with our emotions. And this is arguably like the biggest part of our human experience is our emotions. And there's no like emotional IQ, EQ like class that any of us take, in middle school or high school. And I do think that should be required.
Being able to have a conversation with somebody over a cup of coffee or tea, whatever, and be able to talk about just easy things and to sense and feel how that feels in our body. Does it make your stomach feel good? Do you find your feet feel relaxed? Do you find that you have a little bit more pressure on your toes and your heels are up, which also help your brain to be in a more relaxed place? Or do you find that you are definitely in that fight or flight, fib, freeze, choose one of them,
Right.
mode. And I think that for me in the world of stacking, it's not just people, it's circumstances as well, like
Yeah.
the weather.
Yeah.
There have been, last year in Southern California, we had 7 atmospheric rivers. And there
Mhm.
just came a point where I was just like, fed up with it. I was just
Yeah.
done with the splashing because I was at that time moving from school to school. And
Mhm.
so within 90 minutes, I was back outside, and the majority of places where we parked were far, far away from where we were teaching. And so we were
Mhm.
schlopping through to get to the next place.
Right.
And when you show up, you're expected to be fully on target, fully ready to go, fully everything. And after weeks of that, I wasn't really fully much of that at that point, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that internal conversation for me was one of recognizing that it wasn't people that I was being triggered by, it
Mhm.
was circumstances and that the weather in that particular place, and realizing that there were things that I needed to do to be able to feel better,
Right.
like carry extra sets of socks with me because
Mhm.
I had the great boots, but even then, schlopping through things every now and then, I just feel like my feet weren't as dry as they could be. And so
Yeah.
just simple things, listening internally to find what I needed to be able to navigate through really made a difference. So by the time we got to the 7th
Mhm.
atmospheric river, I was in such a better place, but
Yeah.
I'd had 6 other ones to practice on, right? And so I think that practice is also part of that thing that we need to be able to gift ourselves and
Mhm.
gift the people that we're in relationship with, especially in the sacred union, because when we're trying these things out, trying to find the right word, trying to find the right way of saying it,
Mhm.
it doesn't always land the right way.
Well, and that's such a perfect illustration of your emotional intelligence, because it would be very easy for you to be feeling, out of sorts because of the weather, and then come home and project that onto your husband.
Yes.
And that was one of the kind of the harshest realities of when I moved in with Daniel. That was a big kind of leap in our development as a relationship. He had already done 2 years of spiritual psychology, and he was a lot further along in his maturity and emotional intelligence. And I remember there was a time where I was clearly upset about something that had nothing to do with Daniel.
Mhm.
And he recognized that. And he said, I'm not responsible for your feelings. And I was enraged by that statement because I knew he was right. I knew that my upset had nothing to do with him. It was something that I didn't have access over. I didn't have necessarily the tools at that time to really go into it. And again,
Right.
this is why I say, like, being in sacred union takes a tremendous amount of courage. It's not
It
comfortable
does.
to do this work. It can be really painful and really scary. And it's a lot easier to just project our material onto other people and blame others rather than having that inner authority and that radical self-responsibility.
Yeah.
That's challenging.
So, Jessica, what is the benefit of doing the work? What is the benefit? Because we're not taught to use our words. We're not taught all these emotions to find the right word to actually label how we're feeling.
Mhm.
So, why is it important for us to actually do the work as adults?
Well, let's look at what happens when you don't do the work. And we know there's some of those people in our lives. So that's somebody who's constantly in victim consciousness. They're always blaming, external situations or people for their internal discomfort or upset. And you know, it's an incredibly disempowering state of consciousness to be in when you are at the mercy of your external reality, where it's all these external circumstances are what is determining your inner peace. And
Mm,
when we, on the other hand, when we do this kind of consciousness work, when we engage in, shadow work and working with your inner child and having this conscious level of relating within our relationships, my experience has been it's incredibly empowering to have that inner authority to have that level of self intimacy,
mhm.
because if we're constantly blaming the external reality, then we're never really looking inwards. We're never really having a dialogue with ourselves. And so
Yeah.
in this work, for me, it has been like a homecoming because I've developed such a deep level of intimacy with myself to be able to sit with my most painful memories, with my
Yes.
deepest fears. and to hold space for myself. And I've been able to access that. My experience has been because of the level of love and support of my husband. He was the first one to show me that he could be in his divine masculine energy to root down when I was in a state of emotional crisis.
Yes.
He showed me, he was the first one to show me how to hold space.
Yes.
You know, and so it was through that, it was like, okay, I can do this for myself. I have that inner polarity. I have the divine feminine and the divine masculine inside of myself.
Yes.
When we do our inner child work, you know, that scared inner child is looking for a protector. And it's like, I can be that for myself.
Yes.
And so it's such an empowering, such a sacred, such a beautiful process to do this type of work. And again, it's incredibly courageous. So anyone who's doing it, you know, I bow to you.
Jessica, two different thoughts. One is that I was giggling earlier because as you talked about how Daniel said to you, you know, I'm not responsible. Michael said the same thing to me at one point, and I was so upset. I was just like, I know, but you're the safest person that I can be this angry with,
right?
That you will hold the space for me.
Right.
But I still was projecting. I was just, I call it emotional vomiting. I was just letting it fly.
Yeah.
And it was unhealthy, and it really caused me to start to look at the patterns of where I was and the feel inside of my own body when, as your words, the stacking begins. Because there are definitely people and things that bring up things for me. And I believe that these things come forward in order for us to heal them.
Right.
I don't think that they come forward in order to trip us up. I don't think that there are any gnomes that are out there that are, you know, shooting arrows or spears that are, you know, trying to mess us up in our life. But I do think that we have to do our own work inside of that. And then the other part of that process of gifting yourself, the benefit of gifting yourself, the time to be able to do it. This is not for me, has not been a quick thing. And for the people that I have worked with also, particularly through Reiki, getting to walk alongside them over periods of years as they have chosen to do the internal work to honor themselves, there has also been inside of that place this beautiful opening and growth. And what comes out of that is this authentic creativity that they were trying to force beforehand and couldn't make it happen. And then when they get to this place, the flow just really is incredible. But they needed to give themselves, I needed to give myself time. And I think that's part of this as well, of this conversation about this is not fast, easy work necessarily, but the rewards, the benefits are just tremendous. They are, and I believe also that I'm not spending as much time being triggered. I have now gained hours, maybe up to 2 hours in my day. And that just compounds, right? Over weeks and months, and to be able to access that space and that time.
Totally. And when it's, you know, when you talk about the creative flow that happens when you do this work, specifically when you're in sacred union, part of being in sacred union is sacred sexuality. And this has been so distorted, you know, like sexuality in general through different religious doctrine has been so distorted. And through sacred sexuality, again, bringing the holy into the container of your union as it pertains to your sexual experience with your partner, that can absolutely unlock the floodgates of creativity, because creativity and sexual energy are the same thing. I mean, that this is how babies are made. Creation is our sexual energy, you know, and also like the profound healing that's available through sacred sexuality. I mean, at this point in my life, I've worked with so many different healers and teachers. The most profound healing that's happening in my life right now is between my husband and I in the bedroom.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just a depth and level of intimacy that only he and I can access.
Right.
And I think that's a really important component when people are talking about, you know, the benefits and why do this type of work. Right. The whole purpose of the Heros Gamos, of the sacred union, is to come back into oneness with God.
Yes.
And sacred sexuality is a way of doing that.
Mhm.
It's that merging of the polarities into the oneness.
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh, so profound. So, Jessica, just processing a little bit of what you are sharing and what you are saying. If somebody is in a relationship and they
Mhm.
have found themselves, let's go ahead and say that they have taken that big jump into marriage. So they have that legal part that's in there as well, or
Mhm.
they've been together for more than 7 years. And in America, that means that they are married
Mhm.
based on the time that they have been together for legal purposes. What would you say to somebody who is like, "Oh, I am listening in with my heart, and what I'm hearing is that it's okay for me to begin this journey. I'm not sure that the person I'm necessarily in partnership with is ready for this journey, but I know that I'm ready to start this journey."
Mhm. Mhm.
What advice would you give them for this? And then the second part is going to be for somebody who's not in marriage yet, who
Mhm.
is looking for a sacred union. What advice would you give them?
So for somebody who's in partnership and they want to take their experience and their relationship to this next level, I would invite them to work with either a counselor, practitioner, therapist, or somebody who's well versed in this concept. And hopefully your partner will get on board as well. I mean, I've seen this happen a lot where somebody really takes a big leap in their evolutionary process and their partner doesn't come along.
Mhm.
And that can be really challenging.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't mean that everybody has to, it doesn't have to look the same way for everybody. Like going back to my aunt and uncle, my uncle's a practicing Buddhist and my aunt is Christian. Like they have two different kind of religious philosophies and that worked for them.
Yes.
So it's finding your path and what feels authentic for you. And
Yes.
then hopefully, a lot of times it'll bring your partner in because they'll see the work that you're doing. They'll see the shift that's happening for you and
Yes.
they'll be curious. And that's what happened for me. I saw, my husband is at the time, my boyfriend was going to, the University of Santa Monica and his languaging around,
Mhm.
this level of awareness, self-awareness was like, I'm not going to be able to stay in partnership with him if I can't at least have the same language as him. So
Right.
that was really the first,
Mhm.
my first kind of push into getting into spiritual psychology was just that I could have the same language as him.
Yes.
And then from there, just when you have one good process where when somebody holds your hand and guides you through doing the shadow work or the inner child healing, whatever form that it takes, and you have that breakthrough and that epiphany, it
Mhm.
is priceless.
It is.
And then you see like, oh, this is really doable because before, I know for me, I was really afraid of being emotionally vulnerable and going into
Mhm.
those places that really hurt or that I was afraid of because I thought
Mhm.
it's gonna re-traumatize me. It's gonna bring up all this pain and then I'm gonna be stuck in that well of despair again. And that's not true. You have to descend in order to ascend.
Yes.
So you have to go into those places that hurt and you need to shine the light, shine the love on it to
Mhm.
transmute it, to reconcile it so you're not carrying this burden anymore.
Yes.
Um, and what was the second question you're asking about somebody
So for
who?
somebody who's not in relationship yet, who's getting ready to, and I just want to, as you're thinking about that,
Yeah.
one of my mentors, Elle Ingalls, talks about that we have 10 beautiful seconds when something has happened, when we feel like we have been triggered
Mhm.
before the stress hormones begin to flow.
Mhm.
And those 10 seconds, we get to decide if we want to do something different.
Yeah.
And so being open to the possibility that just because in the past it's been a certain way doesn't mean that this brand new day that is completely new, that it
Mhm.
has to be the same. I can choose to take the ball and chain and pull it into today,
Mhm.
but I don't have to. I have that freedom. And
Yeah.
that in of itself, coming to that place of languaging,
Mhm.
of just being open to the possibility of
Yeah.
something different, a different outcome is remarkable.
It's a muscle that you have to train, just because you've
Yes.
got this epiphany and this awareness of like, oh, this is this wound that I've been
Mhm.
carrying and this is how I've been projecting it onto my partner. That
Yes.
doesn't mean that it's not going to get activated again. But then when it is activated again, you have that moment of clarity where you can either react or respond. And
Mhm.
when you choose to respond differently, that's creating like new neural networks. I mean, it literally is rewiring us.
Yes. Yes.
But going back to somebody who wants to be in sacred union, the people that I've worked with, who I have a couple clients who I've worked with who are ready for partnership, and they're start doing that inner work. Again, it's being able to self-counsel. It's being able to do your shadow work, your inner child healing. And it really is, if you can vision the type of partnership that you want to be in, if you can visualize your perfect partner,
yes,
you have to be that for them.
mm-hmm.
So it's like, are you the best version of yourself to be inside of partnership? Are you the healthiest version of yourself? Are you the happiest version of yourself? Because a lot of this is energetic too. So if you want to be in love, that you don't have to wait for your partner to show up to be in the vibration of being in love, you know. So that's one of the big things that I recommend is like date yourself. Be
Yes.
in that energy of sensuality
Mm-hmm.
and you know, just that yumminess that you would feel when you're first in love with somebody. Can you have that level of intimacy with yourself?
Right.
And so that's the first thing, because how can you invite somebody in to love you deeply if you don't know how to love yourself deeply?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, is like really developing that self intimacy prior to even getting into partnership.
Yeah. Darren Hardy, who wrote The Compounding Effect, shares about how he was at a place in his life where he was ready to be in relationship. And so he talks about how he wrote page after page after page about who he wanted, his perfect wife, right? His future wife, the person that he was pulling in. And then he says very clearly, and then I turned the page and I began writing who I needed to be in order to bring her into my life.
Yep.
And I love that, because it wasn't just him saying, here's the poster of this. I'm going to draw the picture. Here it is. This is what I'm looking for. He was saying, this is what I'm looking for, but I have to work. I have to be the person that's going to be attractive to this as well. And not doing the bait and switch, but choosing, this is who, if this is the person I want to be in relationship with, this is the way that I want to act consistently. This is the person that I want to be in all the different places and times. And gifting himself that space to be able to do that. I mean, just how incredible is that? And he grew up with a dad who he had siblings, and his dad was a football coach, and mom had walked out of the picture. So there wasn't that he had this mothering along the way, right? He had really, you know, it was a coach who raised him, and and he ran the house very much like that. And so Darren said, this is how I want my life to be. And so you can come from really difficult background, really difficult broken relationships, and make the decision for yourself that you are open to the possibility of something different in your own life. It doesn't need to be like what you have witnessed.
Yeah. And that's a really important conversation that I discuss with my clients, is like, what are the patterns that you've seen growing up inside of your family as it pertains to, you know, marriage?
Right.
And that can be very eye-opening. It's like, oh, I don't have anybody to look up to in my family. It's all been, everybody's had affairs, or there's been substance abuse issues, or what have you. And it's like, okay, you're bringing that energy into you know, what you want to manifest in the world. You have to have visibility first and foremost of that.
Yes.
And then you have to have that radical responsibility of like, how is that energy, how is that pattern, how is that dysfunctional way of relating still playing out in my life, and take ownership for that. And then, you know, consciously do that work of transmuting it.
I think one of the most difficult pieces for me was learning to forgive myself. Things that, you know, decisions that I made as a 4 and 5-year-old, really poor decisions. And watching how some of those patterns would repeat themselves through my life. And to say, okay, don't know why or how I made that decision at 4 or 5 years old, that I was better than, and acted on that. Don't know what gave me that that idea, because that wasn't something that was being played out at home. But then just watching how it had played out in my own life, how I kept going back to that card and picking up that card and saying, yep, I'm going to go ahead and play this card again, just to, and really in that space of coming back with deep humility, but choosing to be gentle with myself and acknowledging that for whatever reason that happened, for whatever reason that I chose those patterns, I don't need to continue those patterns. I don't need to be in that space.
Yeah.
And so what does it look like to be in a different space? And I think that again is part of that discovery, that sense of, and then wondering, how can I creatively, easily find a different way of being able to, when gifted those circumstances again, to be able to find a different pattern that I'm going to choose for myself and to play with it.
Yep, that's the shadow work. I mean,
Yes.
through the lens of spiritual psychology, one of the most powerful principles that they teach is compassionate self-forgiveness.
Yes.
So when you do this process of like going back in time and seeing where this program, this dysfunctional program was imprinted, how do you transmute it? And it's through compassionate self-forgiveness. And you literally say to yourself, I forgive myself for having this misbelief that, you know, all men are pigs. I mean, there's these like kind of like collective themes as far as the separation consciousness between men and women that, you know, are very pervasive in specific family trees, but I also think collectively, you know, and that we have to do our work around repairing. But the process of like, I forgive myself for taking on this misbelief. The truth is, and then you come in with that new empowering program. And so it's in catching yourself throughout the day. Like when I'm in a place of judgment, I forgive myself for judging so-and-so about this. The truth is they're doing the best that they can with their level of, you know, skills that they have. Because being in judgment is a very, very low vibrational frequency for us to be in. So that compassion is literally the medicine for judgment. And so again, it's a great tool to use inside a partnership. When you find yourself in that place of like judging your partner,
right?
If they're a mirror, this is the difficult thing, is like, what are they mirroring back to you? What is it that you judge in them that is actually a reflection of my own behavior, either towards myself or others? And that can be, like you said, it's really painful to forgive yourself when you start to do this work, when you look at the ugly parts of yourself that have been hiding in the shadows. There's remorse, there's resentment, there's self-judgment. You know, it's really, it takes a lot of courage to do this because it doesn't feel good. But I will say, and this is what I tell other couples too, it does get easier. It doesn't mean that there's going to be these things that happen in your life. There's always going to be challenges, but the way that you respond and the way that you navigate becomes easier and easier. There's more grace. There's more mercy. Because once you, like when my husband and I were first dating, we would have an upset and they would be big and they would last, you know, for weeks. And now, you know, we've developed these kind of codes of conduct as far as conflict goes, where one of the agreements that we have is we have 24 hours to reconcile. We don't let things go on for too long, because they multiply.
They fester.
Yeah.
And then I can add this one onto that as well. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. And Aunt Matilda did this and it wasn't you, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead and take my hurt over that and put it onto this as well. And fester. And I haven't found yet a time when festering worked well for me, except to bring me to a place of deep humility. And there's great work that happens in those spaces. And I love earlier, Jessica, you talked about how, you know, somebody doesn't have to be in relationship in order to do this sacred work, this sacred union, that it is ultimately about us being in a sacred union with the Creator, with the one I call Papa. And inside of that, then you have this long history of people who have chosen to be monks or nuns, or who have chosen to pull away from the world in order to have some time to be quiet. And some people will do that. We talk about walkabout still happens in Australia, right? And other things that people will do even now, go on a retreat, choose to work with a different mentor for a period of time of knowing that they're going to be having to do some deep soul work in that space,
Yeah.
but choosing to do that in order for there to be this fresh, beautiful, pure water that comes up through, which is, I think, a pure, maybe higher vibrational, looking for the right words, quality of character
Yeah.
for myself.
Yeah. I think that everyone has different missions. You know, there are people who are called to literally live in an ashram and to sit in meditation and to, do that work on a collective
Mhm.
level where they're literally calling in these higher vibrational frequencies on behalf of all of humanity.
Yes.
And that's not my calling. My calling is boots on the ground, you know.
Yes.
So my husband and I, we will go off to do our retreats, to have
Mhm.
our alone time, to
Mhm.
engage in our personal spiritual practice, however that takes form, with
Right.
the intention of embodying that awareness and that frequency, and then, sharing it within our family and our community for the
Yes.
betterment of all, you know.
Yes. And so, as we are talking about this incredible concept of sacred, which the word sacred means set apart, to be special, to be different, right?
Mhm.
The sacred union, so that space that it really is a place for us to be able to grow into, and find and discover and open up the incredible gifts that we as individuals carry,
Mhm.
that sometimes has a blanket of stuff, expectations laying across it.
Mhm.
And so, taking the time in these relationships to be able to pull back and to do those things. I would just love to ask you, Jessica, um, if there was one person that you could have be here with us in this conversation, can be somebody who is alive today, somebody who has transitioned, can be from any period of time at all, that you would want to be in conversation with as well, to ask or to have them share in, who would that person be?
I mean, the first person that comes to mind is my husband. You know, I love having his perspective from the masculine point of view
Yes.
about this work, and just that dialogue of how this work has changed both of our lives, and
Mhm.
how we see this moving forward in the future as far as supporting other couples. Because I keep going back to this quote that I found after my sister had her baby, my nephew, who I was
Yes.
blessed to actually catch, and it was just like a life changing experience. But I found this quote, and it says that it may take a village to raise a child, but it takes healthy, stable marriages to create a village.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and so I do really believe that the most
Mhm.
positive impact that I can have in my life is to help other couples learn how to do this work inside of the container of sacred union, because I
Mhm.
feel like that's the biggest, like, the energy that comes out of a healthy couple. It is, the impact is beyond my level of comprehension. So when we have, like, these pillars in our community, I feel like that really creates a foundation for
Mhm.
for a healthy community. And
Yes.
and if I can help, like, I brag, like, I literally keep a tally mark of how many marriages I've saved through counseling.
Yes.
And I'm really proud of that, because we've all seen the impact of divorce.
Right.
And in some circumstances, it's inevitable. If a relationship has really become volatile and unhealthy,
Mhm.
the best thing to do is to separate. And I do believe that there's a conscious and
Mhm.
kind and respectful way to do that, that we
Yes.
really got to, start upholding, people to.
Mhm.
And in a lot of cases, it's couples who don't have the skills to navigate this material that's coming up inside of their partnership, and it just becomes too difficult, and they separate. And the
Yes.
problem with that is that material is going to come with you into the next relationship. You never get away from it.
Unless you deal with it, you carry it on.
Yep. Yep.
Yes, yes. And I can share that from a whole different place, because over the last year, we chose to retire and relocate across the country. And I'm just here to tell you that what you haven't dealt with
Totally.
moves with you. You take
Yeah.
it with you. And so thinking that, And there are definitely some different pieces that things that are absolutely different in this new setup that we have, where we are in the homestead and all of that. But even inside of that, I'm so grateful that a year ago we were working on packing things up, and here we are exactly a year later, and we're still unpacking. Part of the beauty of that is gifted me the time to go through all the different versions of letting go, of re not re because it's not, I'm doing it, not doing it again, but of that space of moving. That was the word I had such a difficult time using in any of this, because I moved so often as a child and felt like there weren't any options, right? We are moving. And so for this one, I was choosing to relocate. And so I get to go through that process of loving myself and gifting that to myself each time that we continue to unpack. And at this point, we've gone through everything that we have. We know where everything is. We've labeled. It's just a matter in some circumstances of repacking things, or taking everything out of the crate, not just looking inside the crate and saying, yep, I know what's in there. But
and how long have you and Mike been married?
Over 30 years. And so, and when
let's just acknowledge that, because that in itself, I mean, it's such a huge accomplishment. And as somebody who's like, I'm still youngly married. We've only been married for 5 years, but it really means a lot to me to have another couple to look up that's made it through the long haul. And I love that quote. I forget who says it, but it's something to the effect of, to love someone deeply is to attend 1,000 of their funerals.
Right.
So when you were describing like the packing and the unpacking and like this lifetime, 30 years of being together and all the different versions of yourself, of Michael, and then different versions of your partnership too, because that's the thing about sacred union. There's you, there's your partner, and then there's the union itself. It's its own container.
It is.
It's its own being.
Yes.
And that's what I invite people when you're wanting to have this level of partnership. It's like being able to ask or hear the voice of the container of the relationship. What is the relationship saying?
Yes.
When we're having a conflict, you can hear the same thread of energy coming from both of us and inside of this argument. And it's the relationship saying, I want more intimacy, or I need a deeper level of connection, or what have you.
Yes.
And so I acknowledge you and Mike. It's
thank you.
Really, really amazing that you guys have been together for as long as you have, and you do have a beautiful marriage. I've witnessed it.
Thank you. One of the things that you talked about earlier about the stability of marriages to build the village, the instantaneous picture that I had from that, Jessica, was how you put in those deep pillars in order to create a pier that goes out into the ocean, right? And that things are going to come up and hit against those. And so it's not that having a stable marriage means that there aren't winds that have blown through. We have had 3 different dear friends of ours, couples of ours, where one of them has had an affair. And every single time that has happened, we have been shaken to the core because we thought that the people that we were going out to dinner with were people that we knew, right? And so, and every single time that's caused us to come back home and say, okay, who are we? And how did we miss some of those kinds of pieces in what was taking place in their relationship? So I'm just here to say that there are storms, and some of them have been medical storms for both Michael and myself. Some of those storms have also been financial things that impacted us deeply through 2008. And yet we were able to still retire and relocate into a place of openness. And I'm just so deeply grateful for the journey that we are on together, because we're not done yet, right? We still have life ahead of us.
And I think it's a great opportunity too, when you are confronted with, another couple who's let's say there's been an affair. It's easy to fall into that state of judgment of like, well, I can't believe he or she did that, and we would never. The truth is that could happen to anybody.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that I really share from a place of, my own experience with my clients, is like, I'm not above having that could happen to me. That could happen to anybody. The
Mm.
thing is, I know my humanity, and I would never put myself in a position where I would make
Right.
that mistake.
Exactly.
And so that's like inviting in that
Protecting.
level of sanctity into the relationship. I would never go and have a drink with another man.
Right.
Never.
Right.
Because I would never, my union is so sacred. I would never
Mhm.
put it into, like, if you think about a newborn baby, you're not going to
Mhm.
go meet them out in a park and walk away and whatever happens, happens. Like, you would
Yes.
never do that. It's the same thing with my union. I would never put it in an unsafe situation.
Yes.
And
Through all of the years that Mike and I have been together, he has been an executive for a
mhm,
company, and
mhm.
not once has he ever gone out for drinks or food or a meal or anything with a woman alone,
Right.
ever.
And that's
It's
not because
always
you're
been
insanely jealous, or
no,
that's because he
no.
would never jeopardize your guys'
Right.
relationship. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that what you talked about, the container. It's
Yep.
respecting the container,
Yes.
respecting, and for some people who are going to listen to this are going to say, wow, that seems really restrictive. I never asked that of him. That was something that he chose for himself,
Yeah.
out of his respect for our relationship. And
Totally.
so deeply grateful for that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. That's the question to always ask is like, is what I'm doing, is what I'm saying, is this upholding the sanctity? Is this creating a
Right.
stronger container, or is this creating leaks in the container?
Yes.
And it can be subtle things. It could be, affairs come in many forms. That you could be having an
Mm.
emotional affair with somebody where you're sharing intimate parts of your heart with
Right.
somebody, where that energy should be, poured back into your partnership.
Right.
Um, having open marriages is kind of like a big topic that's been coming up a lot, where
Yes.
people want to
Yes.
have multiple partnerships.
Mhm.
Um, I haven't seen a way that works functionally. What I've only seen, again, that creating more leakages. I haven't seen how it
Yes.
actually enhances the
Yes.
partnership.
Mhm.
Um, and going back to like the sacred sexuality and that creative
Mhm.
life force energy, when you
Right.
have a couple who continually pours into each other,
Yes.
the overflow, and
Yes.
it takes multiple forms, the overflow of love, the overflow of health, the overflow of financial prosperity
Yes.
and abundance, creation,
Yes.
versus letting that leak out and spill out to multiple partners. So that
Yeah.
you know when I say sacred union, this is what I mean: in partnership with one other person for eternity.
Exactly. And in that space, we're going to finish this conversation. But Jessica, I would love to invite you and Daniel for the for the two of you guys to come on the show, for the three of us to have a conversation in the future. That would be just, I think, the perfect right
He
next
would love that.
conversation.
He's always like, we should do videos together. And I'm like, okay. And then, life gets busy. So he would love
Yes.
that. Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, and thanks so much for the audience. For being here all the way through and listening. There have been things that have touched my heart in ways that I will be looking at life differently. So grateful for Jessica's wisdom and for how she just shares it so easily as well. And I will see you next time.